Welcome to r/slash Prorevenge, where a nice old grandpa gets revenge against his entitled kids from beyond the grave. Our first post is from hicctl. This story is the story of the grandfather of a good friend of mine, and how he dealt with his inheritance in a very unique way. He had two sons, and each of them also had two sons. In the last year of his life, my friend and I visited him every morning and every evening. You see, he didn't want to go into a retirement home, and apart from getting ready in the morning and in the evening, he did not really need help. Now, I need to explain something real quick. Back in the day, we still have mandatory service in the army for 12 months, but there was several ways around it. I will only explain the most common way since it is connected to our story. You see, instead of going to the army, you could say you refused to go to the army for ethical reasons, which was really just a formality. You simply wrote a one-page essay about why you think you being in the army would violate your personal ethics, and they pretty much had to accept it. But that meant you had to go into civil service. Civil service could be any kind of job that in a wider sense is a service to society. So these jobs range from kindergarten to retirement homes and anything in between, like hospitals, homes for the physically or mentally disabled, Meals on Wheels, pretty much anything you can imagine. You would be paid for that time the same amount of money you would get in the army, and had the right to certain perks like a free room, health insurance, work clothes, etc. The same stuff any soldier gets. Plus, since soldiers get free food, you either got free food or a food allowance. I did my time in a retirement home, and it was an awesome experience. I think a job like that really widens your horizons as a young, arrogant turd, and really matures you and shows you what is actually important in life. Back to the story. I was just done with my time in the retirement home, and for 1 year simply wanted to work around and make some money. Then one of my best friends comes to me and tells me he needs my help. His grandpa can no longer do everything by himself, but really only needs help in the morning to get ready and in the evening. Since I have learned how to do this from real professionals, he asked me to show him, so his grandpa does not yet have to go into a retirement home. He later admitted Grandpa said he would rather kill himself than get into a nursing home, and he seemed really serious about it. He didn't tell me at the time, since he didn't want to pressure me into helping him like that, which I really appreciated. He was one of my best friends, and I really liked his grandpa. When I was younger, I didn't have a grandpa, but we visited him all the time, and I became his unofficial 5th grandson. So, of course, I said yes. The original plan was to show him for 2 to 3 weeks, and then observe him for another 2 to 3 weeks. Then he would do it on his own. But we ended up doing it together for over half a year. Then, Grandpa had a stroke and died within 2 days in the hospital. 2 days later, my friend asked me to come with him to the lawyer where the last will would be read. His grandfather had specifically asked that his will should be read the day before he gets buried, which is quite unusual, but not illegal as such. I asked why he wanted me there, and he told me the lawyer had officially invited me, since Grandpa had left me something as a thank you for my service. I was a bit embarrassed, but also happy that Grandpa had thought so highly of my service, he even put me in his last will. Now, my friend's dad is an entitled butthole, and the same goes for his uncle. We arrived there and went into the room. The entitled dad said to me, "Why the hell are you here? I know that Dad called you in jest his 5th grandkid, but this is for real family." Entitled uncle said, "I bet the little gold digger hoped he would get some money in the will." I was asked to be here by the lawyer. Take it up with him. I have no idea why I'm here. "If you pull something to get his money, I will sue you so hard, even your kids will still need lawyers." My friend said, "Show some respect and stop shouting. I know you two did not really give a flip about your dad, but show at least a minimum of respect." "How dare you talk like that to your elders, you little turd." "You two get exactly as much respect from me as you showed your own father. None." He really shouted the last word, and it finally shut the two up. We sat down and still had to wait for the other two grandkids to arrive. The two sat right behind us, and what they talked about really made my blood boil. Apparently, they had gotten new cars, new jewelry for their wives, and had planned a huge holiday. All that was paid for by credit, and they had planned to pay for it with the inheritance. None of them said even a word about missing him. Being sad that he died? Nothing. Only me, and money, money, money. They seemed to be in competition as to who could spend the inheritance faster the way they planned away the money. Then, finally, we were all there and the lawyer read out a short letter. What I'll tell you here is a much shortened version, but the real thing was several pages. But it boils down to this. In recent years, I more and more realized that some people in my family cared a lot more about me than others. I am especially disappointed in my two sons, but I wanted to be really fair and not biased, so I came up with a point system. Each letter or phone call was 1 point, plus 1 extra if it is very long. Each visit was worth 2 points per hour, plus 1 point per hour of travel to me and back. Helping me out with something was 3 points per hour. This is the final result over the last 3 years of my life. Entitled Dad, 8 points. Entitled Uncle, 10 points. Entitled Uncle's first kid, 150 points. Entitled Uncle's second kid, 133 points. My friend's brother, 288 points. My friend, 7,341 points. Me, 5,883 points. My lawyer has already liquidated most of my assets except the house. Once it is sold, the money will be divided by the points so we know what each point is worth. And then every person gets a share of the money according to his points. For about a minute, you could hear a pin drop. Then, both Entitled Dad and Entitled Uncle started shouting at the same time that they knew we would have pulled something and this will would never stand. Of course, they tried to sue Entitled Uncle, his kids, and Entitled Dad together, but they lost. And there was a secret clause. Not really secret, it was simply not read to us that day, so nobody realized it was there since we all assumed everything was read to us on that day by the lawyer. The will said that if somebody sues against the will, he loses his share of the inheritance. It took nearly 3 years until all the lawsuits were over. I was blown away when we finally got the money. I am not naming a sum, but it was way more than I felt comfortable accepting. So I wanted to give at least some of it to the other 3 grandkids. But my friend finally convinced me to accept it by saying to me, "You cared for him when he needed you without expecting anything for it, which makes you 10 times more his family than any of those effers." They got what they deserved. Oh my God, that was delicious to read. That grandpa, he's laughing from his grave, man. This point system is brilliant. It's an objective measurement of how stuck up and entitled these people actually are. I am so glad that OP and his friend got the inheritance that they actually deserved. Our next post is from wanttoavoiddramma. 2 years ago, a new family moved into our quiet little neighborhood and began their reign of terror. We lived here for over 20 years in this neighborhood, and except for these past 2 years, it's been wonderful. I love our neighbors, except this family. This family sucks. I'm not even sure where to begin. They are loud, they are dirty, they are obnoxious, their dogs bark at all hours. They constantly yell at each other, and they throw parties well into the night. They steal my older neighbor's paper. They actually trained their Rottweiler to fetch their neighbor's paper. Impressive, but wrong. They throw their dog's poo into other yards. Ugh, so much. They even cut my 80-something-year-old neighbor's prized roses for themselves. Who does that? There are about 100 issues I could write about and how we've all dealt with them, but this past weekend was my own glorious take on it all. Oh, and yes, we tried talking to them. We tried inviting them over. We've done nice things for them, and all we've expected is that they act like decent neighbors. That's never happened. In our neighborhood, parking is scarce. Most of these homes are classic 1950s with single lane driveways, and parking is limited even on the streets. There's a busy road a few blocks away that has a great nightlife and popular restaurants, which means that at times, especially on weekends, the street can fill up. This family has 4 drivers and 5 vehicles, with only enough space for 2 in their driveway at a time. Constantly, they would park and leave their vehicles for days and sometimes weeks in front of others' homes, sometimes leaving their driveway empty for no reason with all their cars parked on the road. I kind of believe that, in itself, isn't that big of a deal except for how and when they would do it. They were intentional about it and would try to do it to cause the most grief with everyone. And this went on for months, a complete FU to everyone. After months of this and no one retaliating or giving them the satisfaction of how pissed we all are, they started parking deliberately in ways to make it difficult to get out of our driveways. I had to have my husband come out most mornings to guide me so I wouldn't hit their car as I backed out of my own driveway. There were also times where they squeezed my neighbor's car on the street to where they couldn't get out. Finally, an older retired neighbor goes down to the city police station and inquires about what to do. They found a code or law stating that so much space from the sides of driveways and yada 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 is required. So we come home one night to freshly painted yellow curbs outlining every house surrounding this one. A few weeks ago, my husband's car breaks down and he has to get towed. On his way back, he starts talking with the tow truck driver about these butthole neighbors and their cars. He tells my husband that if these cars are parking illegally, we should call the non-emergency line, and if they receive a ticket, to call him and he can tow them at the owner's expense. It's the law. My husband and him keep talking and even meet up for a beer a few nights later. They are big fans of the Blazers. Rip City, he's a real good guy. About a month ago, we met a couple in our fair city, and it just so happens that the husband is an officer. We were already planning on meeting that Friday night, and when we met, I brought up the butthole neighbors and their parking. He says that he'll drive through on his shift, and if he gets time and if he sees them parked in the yellow, he has no problem ticketing them. Great. He also gets some of his friends to check it out when they have time too. Fantastic. We've been calling almost daily at this point about their cars parked illegally, but nothing was happening. That Saturday night, he sends me a text saying he ticketed 3 cars. I missed the text, so no tow truck, but I kind of figured with the 3 tickets they'd get the idea. They didn't. Off and on all week, it was the same. This past Saturday, the teenage son throws a party and everyone, I mean every single one of their guests and them parked in the yellow of someone's driveway or blocked someone out altogether. Obviously, the little jerk told all of his friends to block our driveways or block our cars in. I sent a text to our officer friend who told me to call the non-emergency line and he'd be the one to look into it. But I'm scheming bigger. I call up the tow truck driver and tell him that there are at least 15 cars parked illegally, and all are about to receive parking tickets for blocking driveways and cars. I let him know we are friends with an officer, and he and I scheme a little further. We get a solid plan. I call our officer friend back and tell him our plan, and I also mention that the party is likely going to be filled with underage drinkers. Now, I hate busting parties, but I make exceptions for little turds and especially little underage drinking and driving turds. He and I finalized the plan. Here's how it all went down. Officer and 3 of his partners go through the neighborhood citing all of the cars. Meanwhile, our tow truck driver friend has assembled a group of drivers in the nearby grocery store parking lot. My husband and I make an anonymous call about a possible underage party. The tow truck drivers start at the end of our street, grabbing the cars as quickly as possible. A few alarms here and there, but no way they could hear it in the party. When they approach the house, my husband makes an anonymous call about an underage party in our neighborhood. Conveniently, our officer friend just so happens to still be in the neighborhood, so he and his partner go over to the house to check on it. As they knock on the door, lights go out, music shuts off, and the house goes quiet. At this moment, the tow trucks come in and are now towing the remaining 5 cars right from in front of their home. I just wish I could see the kids' faces inside as they are all having a dilemma about what to do. Do they go out and bust themselves for underage drinking and try to stop their cars from being towed? Or do they just sit and bite the bullet and watch $250 go down the drain? On Sunday, they had 3 cars returned from being towed and all 3 are parked just shy of the yellow lines. I'll call this a win. My husband and a couple of neighbors also spent Sunday putting up some new cameras. They were all very giddy and loud about it. Something about all the lights and police on Saturday made them nervous. Lol. OP, I am glad you got justice, but if you manage to catch acts of vengeance against your terrible neighbors on any of your security footage, I will happily pay you cash money for that footage. Please hit me up because I would love to put that on my channel. And to everyone else, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications because if I get footage like that, you will definitely want to be around to watch it. That was rSlash and this is rSlash bloopers with bonus footage of Hugo at the end. Our next post is our next post is our next post is from boom. Our next post is from wanttoavoiddramma. Our next post is from wanttoavoiddramma. 2 years ago, a new family. 2 years ago, a new family. 2 years ago, 2 years ago, a new family. 2 years ago, a new. 2 years ago, Pooch. You go. 2 years ago, a new family moved into our. 2 years ago. You want to come up on my lap? You want to come up on my lap, buddy? Come on, Pooch. Come. Ah, you're getting too big for this, though. You go. Can I help you? You go. You go. You're so cute. You're so cute. You go. You go.